Welcome to Own Your Zone podcast, where we feature venture capitalists, innovators, angels, and other investors who create positive impact globally. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, I'm Jinan, Glasgow, George, a patent attorney and founder of Neo IP. Our law firm helps clients maximize their return on investment for patent assets. I'm also host of this show, Own Your Zone, where we feature venture capitalists, angel investors, and innovators who are making positive impact in the world. Some of our past guests include Paul Gyra of Thompson Family Office, Cole Crawford of Vapor.io, a super angel, and recently Sassy Duggleby of Venus Aerospace, an amazing woman innovator in the aerospace industry. This episode is brought to you by Neo IP, where we help companies increase their valuation, protect their business through strategic business planning and IP protection. At Neo IP, we provide legal services for intellectual property to help companies manage risk, develop portfolios of value, and monetize their IP assets. We believe ideas are the one true unlimited resource, but they're only valuable if you transform them into assets and use them to make positive impact. Learn more about us at neoipassets.com. Thank you. I'm so excited today. We have with us Alicia Hanf, who is the CEO and managing partner at Dear Mama Ventures. She has over a decade of experience in startups, sales, marketing, biz dev, venture capital operations, and fundraising. She's worked with organizations like Walt Disney, the NFL, and the US Army. She's even designed curriculum for Saudi Aramco's WAD Accelerator, and she's helped hundreds of startup founders launch businesses. Her military training and personal resilience have certainly contributed to her success as an advisor to fast-paced startups and international celebrities. She is committed to supporting veteran, women, and minority entrepreneurs and inspiring everyone to do their best. She lives in LA with her two daughters. Welcome to the show, Own Your Zone, Alicia.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Your background is so amazing and impressive. How did you get into running and managing a VC firm, though? That seems like a little bit of a different trajectory.
Yeah, it does. It's certainly, I always say my background and my journey has many twists and turns. It's certainly not traditional by any means. As you mentioned, I was in the Army for 6 years, got out of the Army and was part of a special branch while I was in the Army, as part of a special branch of the Chemical Corps known as Technical Escort. And so my role was building ecosystems and working, with a lot of our three-letter agencies, a lot of really good people all over the world. And went to Afghanistan, and I just said, can we use empathy and trust to build ecosystems of support versus force, and really just work with some of the world's finest humans. When I came back from Afghanistan, I took a big shift from working in the military and just said, I'm going to work with professional athletes. It's always been, I think, in my nature to pave the way for other fierce women where I feel like women aren't represented. And so where I saw a big opening was in sports. And I was getting ready to be a sports agent. And when I was doing that, I ended up receiving a call from my little brother. He said 2 words that changed my life forever. And I realized I was about to be on the brink of the largest tragedy of my life. He said, "Mom's dead." And and what I realized in that moment was that my mother was a victim of domestic violence when she was in an abusive relationship, and when she tried to leave, the man killed her.
Oh my,
and so,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, thank you. And so I'm a single mom myself. I left our entire life behind in Baltimore, Maryland, came back home to LA. And when I got here, I told my little brothers, I said, this moment is going to change us for the rest of our lives. We will never be the same, but we get to choose whether this changes us for better or for worse. And so we made a pact that we were going to change the world a little to a lot each day. And so I actually got my start into VC by getting my start in tech. I launched an ed tech company and realized quickly that as a woman of color, a woman in tech, a single mom, a military veteran, I had so many obstacles to overcome instead of opportunities to succeed. And I ended up working with veterans and working with entrepreneurs, launched the LA chapter of Bunker Labs, helped to scale that organization to about 35 cities. And that's where I started working with all these entrepreneurs. very naturally found myself transitioning into venture capital because I had this deal flow and I was, as one VC said, my superpower is picking good companies.
Ah,
And yeah, and so when everything happened post George Floyd, I was actually in the midst of launching another fund. And, I went to visit my mother's grave for the first time since losing her.
wow.
And I wrote a letter and I said, Dear Mama, I wholeheartedly believe it's my mission and purpose in life to create an ecosystem where all people can show up vulnerable enough to dream and have the resources to do it. And it was seeing my handwriting say, Dear Mama. I actually put on Tupac's Dear Mama. And I said, okay, that's it. I'm launching Dear Mama Ventures for the culture, by the culture, but really for the world. And that is sort of how I transitioned into from military to startup founder to launching accelerators to working with other VCs to starting my own.
Wow. Such an inspiration you are just for choosing to take a moment of adversity. I mean, losing your mother and choosing to impact society for good instead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Thank you.
And you mentioned also this superhero power that you have is like picking great companies. Let's unpack that a little bit. What do you look for? How is it something in the founders that resembles your own ability to turn something around, or what is it you look for in these companies?
Yeah. So I love that you asked that question and that you even touched on, from losing my mother and turning that, I always say pain into purpose or that trauma into triumph. Since it is Black History Month, I just had the pleasure of meeting with Dr. King's daughter, Dr. Bernice King. And one of the things she said was that our unearned trauma becomes our redemption. So, what we go through, if we can turn that into purpose, is really our redeeming qualities. And I've, essentially developed this rare grit and resilience and purpose through my traumas. And I think that is what's enabled me to connect with so many people over the years. And it's certainly one of the things that we look for when we evaluate founders. I always say this rare grit, this do or die mentality. It's not about pedigree necessarily. I don't care that you went to Harvard or went to an Ivy League school, but are you driven by purpose? Are you driven by something bigger than yourself? Have you had to overcome? And do you have not only the tenacity to overcome all odds to be successful, but do you have the audacity and the courage to not only dream, but to fail? It takes a lot of courage to give yourself permission to fail. And knowing that when we fail, it's not the end state, but we're failing forward. So rare grit is one of the first key factors we look for, because as you know, this isn't easy. Being an entrepreneur is one of the toughest jobs in the world. And so can you really withstand the test of time?
Oh, that's fantastic. And are you investing across industries? Are you also agnostic on that? Or are you just in tech? Tell us a little bit more about your fund's purpose.
Yeah, so our fund's purpose is really based on the foundation that, we believe as people that the world has transformed, and an inclusive culture is the foundation for global transformation. So our fund's mission and thesis is really centered around closing the ecosystem access gap that exists for underestimated entrepreneurs. So if you look at it, and everybody knows the stats, but of the couple $100 billion that's invested, when we look at less than 1% of that going to women of color, there's a problem there. And so primarily we invest in, like you said, veterans, women, Black and brown, those of us who are underserved. And then we are very industry agnostic, but because we work with a lot of professional athletes and family offices and get closed deals in certain areas on healthcare, food and agriculture, clean tech is a big one. We love the EV space. And then sports media in gaming is also an interesting one. And then we get some CPG deals quite a bit. I keep saying like I'm trying to stay away from CPG and they keep finding me.
Oh my. Well, it's a challenge to do that. I'm sure that as you're diligencing and you've found those entrepreneurs with true grit, all of these industries that you're talking about are innovation heavy. What role does intellectual property play for you as you assess those?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that's a fun question that I think we have to work really hard to not sound buzzwordy with, when we ask people like, oh, what's your IP? Do you have patents pending? And actually one of the reasons why I love our growing relationship so much is because how do we not only find companies with IP, but how do we potentially look for areas where there can be IP. So sort of harvest that in advance or look for those. I'm mine for those moments. But I think IP is huge because it certainly plays a role in differentiating and becoming that secret sauce for entrepreneurs. All of these verticals that I mentioned, I could name, 5 that I'm obsessed with and go down the road. And if we had a row of people standing next to me that were in VC, they could name, each person could name 5 different ones that we've never heard of before, right? So that IP, I think, becomes the secret sauce and really the differentiator in these companies.
It is, we think of it as the unique value proposition, right?
Yes.
Because
yes.
inventors and solving problems in an inventive way is a superhero power. Every person has the resource of ideas, but very few people really pay attention to it, and even fewer act on it to create IP assets. So when you get that combination of a founder with real grit, as you say, and innovation and IP and opportunity in a market, and then you're valuing them in a way because of who they are. I love that. That sounds like a winning combination.
Yeah, we'd probably make a pretty powerful team, the two of us.
I think so. I think so. Tell me how you work with other funds. And you mentioned family offices or athletes, pro athletes. Is your fund collaborating with many others? Tell us about some of that.
Yeah, so one of the ways we aim to de-risk investments for our LPs is we don't lead rounds at this stage. We're not leading investment. So we really rely on partnering with really great funds who are first and foremost, mission and values aligned, but also investing in the similar industries as us to share deal flow, to bring us deals, and then to co-invest with. So partnership is a huge role in what we do. And like I said, we get a lot of our deal flow, and one of our advantages of the fund is that we get a lot of deals that are closed with preferred terms through our network. So whether that's family offices, whether that is professional athletes, or other funds that we partner with.
Oh, excellent. That certainly de-risks things for sure. Are you very active on boards? Many VCs are. What's your position on that?
Yeah, I think playing a board role is, I think it's important. I think it gives us a different perspective and more of an empathetic perspective when we're also talking to startups. I think I have a board for my fund. And when I had my own tech company, my startup, I had a board. And I think it takes a lot of vulnerability, especially from early stage startups, to ask people to participate on their board. What you're asking of your board members, first and foremost, to believe in you. You're asking them to be an extension of you, but also to allow you as a startup founder to be an extension of them. So can you make connections? Can you make recommendations? In the military, we would say, have my six. Like, do you have my back? Are you seeing things that I potentially might not see through your expertise or your lens? Mm-hmm. So I think for VCs to be on boards, it's really important because it gives us a more of an empathetic view into the world of a startup. And it's also a very important position for a startup to ask us to be involved. So I am on a few boards.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's besides maybe not very many women in VC or leading VC funds as you are. I think we see that in boards as well, having the diverse viewpoint, not just from experience, but also a different personal point of view is a really valuable thing, a really valuable thing. We've noticed.
I wanted to know if I could go ahead.
No, please.
I just wanted to say something because what you said there about having women on the boards or more diverse boards and being one of few women in venture capital. So I think as a whole, whenever I look at a deck and I see the board slide, I always look at the board. I always look through them and I'm like, is there a woman? Are there people of color? Are you all drinking from the same Kool-Aid and essentially have the same, thought process? And so small anecdote. So when I was in the military, I was the only woman on a 14-man team. They didn't even call it a 14-person team. It was 14-man team. And every mission I would go on, the team would pick me. And I would say, why are you guys choosing me? And they would say, you have combat multipliers. And I'm like, what is a combat multiplier? And they would say, you have unique strengths and superpowers as a woman that we don't have. I just, by nature of being a woman, saw things differently than they saw it as men. And I think we don't see enough women. We certainly don't see enough women of color on boards. Mm-hmm. And we're missing out from a company standpoint on having a unique perspective that they would not ordinarily have access to. So I really just urge people to please diversify, not just because it's the right thing to do, checking the box, but it is the best business decision for you.
I often notice where I've been on boards that I ask different questions than anybody asks. And I think that's a valuable thing too, just to bring a different point of view and a curiosity, and the courage, I think, to be creative and ask questions that benefit the company at the end of the day, and to really bring everything that we have to the table. I noticed that I've had that feedback occasionally from other board members, like, you are very active here with this company because we know that you have to connect people to resources they need. They don't already have all of them. They're doing a new thing. It's an innovative company. We really need to stretch as board members to try to fill any gaps or make those connections for the companies that we advise. Absolutely. I love it. So who are some women who have inspired you on your journey? You've obviously mentioned the importance of your mother and how you've deployed that, but I know you're super connected globally. Tell me about some other women in VC that have inspired you.
Oh my goodness. So women in VC. So somebody who I don't know that well comes to mind recently because she said something that was just so powerful. So there's a woman, Monique Woodard from Cape Capital. And she recently had a Forbes article, and I hope you find it. And I'm going to do my best to paraphrase this. But she said, raising a venture capital as a woman is like crawling through glass. She said, raising capital as a Black woman is like crawling through glass naked, and then they pour fire ants all over your body.
Oh my gosh.
And and for one, to have the courage as a Black woman to say that in Forbes, to be that vulnerable, like she was keeping it all the way real. It is so hard to raise capital as a woman. It is very hard to raise capital as a woman of color. And for her to say that, when I read it, it pierced my soul, because I said, yes, and like, I feel this too. And how do we say this vulnerably and have the courage to go out there? Because I think one of the biggest challenges we face as women in VC is that we go into these rooms and we have to choose instantly. Do I show up vulnerable and ask for help? Or do I show up and say, I have all the answers. I have the best deal flow. I'm qualified. I'm all these things, because we're constantly having to prove ourselves in this male dominated space. So it really impacted me. It hit me in the heart, because it's how I feel. And also, how do we make this better? So shout out to Monique Woodard. Another woman that I think is just so inspirational and is also just a light is Bahia Robinson with Include VC. And one of, I would say, my battle buddy is really with Lockstep Ventures is a woman named Katie Loeb. Okay. And Katie is just somebody who walks into the room and it's filled with light and love. She is so smart. She just gets it. And their mission and their vision for their fund, it is so values driven. So what they're building, what they're creating is really special. Wow.
And, we didn't really tease this out from what you said before. These are amazing women that you're mentioning. Is that the data, I'm very big on data. The data actually shows that VC funds who are investing in diverse founders fare better. There's better results. Let's unpack that a little. What are your thoughts on it? Are you seeing better results?
I mean, the answer is yes. Not only do funds who are run by women or people of color perform better, but when we invest in diverse founders such as women, I mean, and the Forbes studies are out. There's, Harvard Business Review. There's so many articles that talk about this, but we're overperforming our white male counterparts left and right significantly. They also show that when you invest in diverse founders, so minorities in general, the Black and brown women, military veterans, that in the times of economic downturn, which we're in now, we're more likely to overperform because we're resilient. We've had to do more with less, essentially our entire careers and potentially life. So in times like we're in now, we're better to come out on the other side, okay? Because we have that grit. We have that do or die mentality. We've overcome despite all odds already.
Amazing. And again, it sort of underscores the importance of your fund and what you're doing, really proving it out. And then most people who are successful I note this across entrepreneurs and obviously venture as well, but are reaching back to the communities where they came from, whether it's their alma mater or whether it's the community literally that they grew up in. As you have returned to LA, you are giving back in a way, but you are investing in more change, in bigger change and scaling it, right?
Yes.
So to that end, what are you looking forward to? Everyone is speaking about recession. I'm not participating in it. I imagine you're not either.
You're like, I'm out. I'm opting out.
What are you looking forward to in the coming year? What's on your agenda? What's on your horizon? What do you see?
Yeah, what am I looking forward to in this upcoming year? I think about this all the time. I think last year I think I did 37 trips. I was on the road a lot, building relationships, fundraising, figuring out my footing, learning, as Brene Brown would say, to stand my sacred ground when I walk into these rooms. So I spent a lot of time on the road. I spent a lot of time, I was in Abu Dhabi and Dubai and Ghana and all these amazing places, but I was on the move. I think this year, what I'm most looking forward to is just being present, being really intentional with who I'm meeting with, who we're engaging in conversations with, having more conversations about partnering with other funds and people who are mission aligned, because one of our core values of the fund is an African proverb, and it goes, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Yeah. And I am a firm believer that when we're intentional about the rooms that we're in, and I say this all the time, what happens in these rooms has the ability to change the world if we just seize that moment and we don't let it go. And so being present, being intentional with who we're meeting with, grabbing onto those people that I know are mission aligned, and just really deploying capital in a meaningful way in our communities, for our communities, really with a global impact, so that we can be the change the world so desperately needs.
Amazing. Do you expect more travel this year then? It sounds like you can be present wherever you are. Are you anticipating more travel? Where will we find you this year?
Yeah, so this year I've already been in Miami, Milan, Arizona, and Salt Lake City for All-Star Weekend. So I've already been quite on the road, but I will be traveling this year. So I'm excited to get down to Miami. I'm sure I'm always there a lot for different conferences, but I will be traveling.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I know. I think we met in Miami, right? So it's certainly a good place to find you for sure. And you mentioned a couple of the technology sectors that intrigue you, that you're really always watching, and Evie was one of them. Can you share a little bit about what's attracting you so much to Evie right now at this time?
Yeah, I think for one, it's just, there's a lot of opportunity. So we're forecasting that as an $800 billion market by 2027. So a lot of opportunity there. I think, California, New York, the Congress has passed laws stating that by 2030 and before, we have to go get all, electric vehicles. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for me. I'm seeing this as like a gold rush in a way, of where it might not be the actual gold, but like, what are the picks and the shovels of the EV or the clean tech industry that are going to really provide a lot of solutions. So one of the things that I think is really exciting to me is that while we want to make this transition to green, we don't have the infrastructure yet to get off of fossil fuel. So there's just so much opportunity there in grid stabilization and in electric vehicles, making it accessible for everyone, constantly talking about this access. If you need to spend $120,000 on an electric vehicle and you need to own a home, that excludes already so many people who cannot afford a vehicle that expensive and who are unfortunately, living in apartments and don't have that access to home ownership yet. So when we can innovate this space enough so that everybody has access to it, that's when it's truly innovative, in my opinion. And I'm excited to see that happen.
I do agree. It seems that the infrastructure, kind of the sexy part is the EV cars and all of that, but electrification is an infrastructure thing.
Yeah.
When we added iPhones and smartphones to our electric power grid, just the charging of all our devices added 30% demand, more requirement for energy. When we bring all autos, all transport to that, our current grid won't handle it. Not in the US or globally.
Not anywhere else.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that infrastructure is a key. We're looking at a few companies there right now. We'll follow up in detail about them for sure. But it is an amazing space. And we appreciate your vision, Alicia. You are amazing. You are inspirational. You are a leading woman in VC, and we're delighted that you shared time with us today. Do you have a parting thought for our listeners?
Oh my goodness. So a parting thought for me always just goes back to being centered on our why. I think my mom used to say to me growing up all the time, she would write it in letters to me. She would say, shoot for the moon. And even if you miss, you'll land amongst the stars. And growing up, I always thought that was a permission slip to pursue my dreams. And now as an adult in this role, I realized she was giving me permission to fail and permission to find my purpose and find my why and to just keep trying. And so my parting thoughts for everyone is to shoot for the moon. Don't be afraid to have those big dreams, but also give yourself your grace when you fall and when you fail, and know that you're failing forward, and just to keep going. And no matter what, you've got this.
Oh, fantastic. So inspirational, even to the end today. Where can people find you online? Where would you like us to connect with you or look you up?
Yeah, so my Instagram is Alicia the Key. I'm on LinkedIn. It's Alicia Hanf. And our website is dearmamaventures.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you for listening to the Own Your Zone podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.